When you've been playing that latest AAA hit for a little while, no matter how engaging the characters or story might be, it's easy to get a little bit bored of the gameplay mechanics. So it's nice then when developers pepper in a couple of minigames for a bit of added spice. Over the years, we've seen tons of different minigames gracing our favourite titles. From the pipe puzzles of BioShock to the likes of The Witcher 3's Gwent, these little distractions help to keep the game nice and fresh after we've been shooting splicers and slaying monsties for 10 hours straight. Not all of them are winners, however, and just occasionally, studios will include minigames that leave players utterly perplexed and wondering what on earth the devs were thinking, not only when they came up with the idea in the first place, but the entire time they were coding it. Let's have a look at a few examples, shall we? I'm Peter from TripleJump, and here are the 10 weirdest minigames of all time. Number 10. Flighting, Assassin's Creed Valhalla. When you think of Vikings, you probably assume they're not the sort to settle things with words. However, it turns out you'd be wrong. Or at least if Assassin's Creed Valhalla is anything to go by, anyway. Indeed, between raiding monasteries and partaking of the odd drinky poo, Eivor can have a go at the art of flighting. There are opponents located all over the map in both England and Norway, and the aim is to outwit your adversary with the clever use of words. Upon finding someone with whom to flight, players must choose a small, medium or large bet before letting the insults flow. The opponent will begin by crafting a cutting diss, and it's up to players to choose a response from the 3 that the game offers. In order for the retort to be successful, it must both rhyme with what the rival has laid out, whilst also fitting with the same rhythm. The whole thing is basically a Viking rap battle, and as out of place with the rest of the game it might seem at first, players will quickly find themselves scouring the country looking for someone else to flight with. Hey James, your editing is crap and your writing is worse.
If you've got a problem with my work, you could have told me in private.
No, James, come back. I was just flighting with you. Number 9. Slot machines, Pokemon Red and Blue. If you've been living in a cave for the past 25 years, then you might be unfamiliar with Pokemon, so here's a crash course. At the age of 11, children leave their homes to explore the country and capture animals. They prove their mastery by forcing these Pokemon they've caught to fight one another until one of them passes out, at which point, if they've chosen a powerful enough opponent, they'll be rewarded with a badge. Now, whilst we're willing to overlook the fact that the children are being sent out into the world alone to basically learn how to cockfight, what we're not okay with is allowing said youngsters to gamble away their hard-earned cockfighting cash. Indeed, whilst wandering the streets of Pokemon Red and Blue's Celadon City, players could stumble across the Game Corner, which contained a whole bunch of slot machines. The machines paid out special coins that could be traded for TMs, or if you managed to accrue enough of them, rare Pokemon. The slot machines could be found in every generation up to and including the 4th, however, due to various countries' laws around gambling, and when it can and cannot be shown to the kiddos, it's failed to make an appearance since then. Oh dear, what a shame. Number 8. Every WarioWare minigame, the WarioWare series. That's right, folks, it's time for a triple W. That's a WarioWare wildcard entry. Oh, very good. Because how could we possibly compile a list of the most bonkers minigames without giving at least a nod to a series that has built its legacy on trying to outweird itself in minigame form? The first game, WarioWare Inc. Mega Micro Games, released in 2003 for the Game Boy Advance and contained over 200 different minigames, or as the title might imply, micro games. These games varied wildly in nature, but all of them required the player to execute a pretty simple task in a very short period of time. Audiences could expect to undertake a load of weird and wonderful objectives, which could consist of anything from karate chopping their way through logs and getting a small dog to dance, to threading a needle and picking someone's nose. Though the aim of each game wasn't actually totally explicit, explaining what to do with a single word, the entire game was controlled using using only the D-pad and A button, so it didn't take much to figure each one out. As the years have gone on, the WarioWare series has only gotten nuttier, with the most recent release for the Nintendo Switch continuing the theme by giving players another 200 completely bonkers minigames. You'd have thought they'd have run out of ideas by now, but I think they're just rectifying that issue by getting even weirder. Oh, jeez. Number 7. Speechcraft, The Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. If you're anything like our writer, you'll dread interacting with others in social situations for fear of saying the wrong thing. Fortunately, this isn't something you have to worry about in video game land, as thanks to the quick save feature in a lot of RPGs, you can always just go back and do a conversation again. This is, however, a pretty boring way to approach a casual chat with your average NPC, or at least that's what the folks down at Bethesda presumably thought when they dreamed up Speechcraft, a minigame that centers on getting the best possible reaction out of an NPC with whom the player character is conversing. The minigame requires players to increase the NPC's disposition in order to get them to trust you. This is done by hovering over the coerce, admire, boast, and joke options on a small wheel and observing the NPC's facial expression, then choosing the options accordingly. Players must also try and align the largest wedges within the wheel with the best choices, eventually maxing out the NPC's disposition, which can open them up to telling the player juicier secrets. It's an interesting mechanic for sure, but it's also an incredibly bizarre one, given that you have to select all 4 options at some point in each round of Speechcraft, even if you've identified that the NPC in question doesn't like it when you, for example, tell a joke or admire them. It's like the video game equivalent of going up to someone and just shouting, "I'm really good at sports! Why did the chicken cross the road? You're pretty! Give me all your money!" and hoping they'll only pay attention to the bits that they like. Number 6. Forklift Racing, Shenmue. Considering that the plot follows one man and his quest for revenge following the murder of his father, Shenmue sure has a great deal of lighter moments to break up all of the serious stuff. While searching for the mad angels at the harbour, our boy Rio gets himself a job driving a forklift truck. Though this doesn't sound like a particularly exciting endeavour, the staff do like to engage in a bit of fun first thing in the morning to get them all nice and pumped for the working day ahead. They do this by racing laps around the warehouse in their forklift trucks, and if Rio is lucky enough to snag himself first place, then he wins a tiny forklift capsule toy. The minigame is strange for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I don't know of any responsible business owner that would allow their staff to use company resources to engage in a potentially dangerous race. And secondly, the whole thing is at tonal odds with the game, and as players swerve in front of their co-workers whilst listening to generic rock tunes, they might just forget that they're supposed to be avenging someone's death. Still, most of us would do anything to win that tiny hunk of plastic. Dad can wait, it's fine. Number 5. Hildy's Dance, Dead to Rights. Over the years, we've seen some interesting ways of distracting enemy goons, but we've never seen anything quite as odd as Hildy's Dance in Namco's 2002 neo-noir endeavour, Dead to Rights. When protagonist Jack suspects that crime boss Augie Blatz, what kind of a name is that, has had a hand in the murder of his father, Frank, he goes to the Den of Iniquity to interrogate Blatz. Fearing that he's got no chance of getting past the bouncers unscathed, exotic dancer Hildy offers to distract them, just so Jack can sneak in undetected and get the answers he needs. Her chosen method of distraction, though, is of course a sexy dance, and players must engage in a rhythm action game to ensure that all eyes stay firmly focused on Hildy. Not only is the minigame a complete shift in tone from the rest of Dead to Rights, but it's also a bit insulting that the only way the female character is able to help is by shaking her tartars at a crowd of men. Not to mention the fact that bouncers in a strip club would be pretty useless if their minds could easily be taken off the job by a scantily clad dancer, just saying. We can't help but feel like faking a heart attack or starting a bar brawl would have been much more effective and far less tasteless. Number 4. Piñata Romance, Viva Piñata. Aside from all of the colourful creatures that players were able to attract to their gardens, the 2006 life simulator Viva Pinata can be remembered for one of two things: its catchy theme song, and that weird minigame that got the pinatas to mate. In order to get their pinatas in the mood for some lovin', players were tasked with safely moving one of the little critters from one end of a maze to another, that always gets me in the mood, in order to unite them with their intended, so that they could, well, you know, Viva Pinata. There's also the opportunity to collect coins along the way, because nothing screams romance like a jangling pocket full of loose change. Before you start planning on breeding all your pinatas, however, it's worth remembering that not only are players limited to just 60 seconds to complete the mazes, but that they're also lined with little bomb-shaped creatures called loathers, whose sole purpose is to kill the mood. Now, though we weren't expecting Discovery Channel levels of realness from this game, we can't help but feel like the maze minigame is a rather odd way of demonstrating the birds and the bees. Then again, what would I know about it? On second thoughts, babe, I'm feeling in the mood, so do you want to go to Hampton Court? Number 3. The sneezing minigame. Mario and Luigi, Bowser's Inside Story. God, first WarioWare's Gold Digger minigame, and now this. We're not really sure what it is with Nintendo and noses, but someone really ought to tell them that their weird fixation is bordering on some sort of fetish at this point. In fairness, Mario and Luigi Bowser's Inside Story is one of the stranger Mario games to begin with. Released in 2009, the game sees Mario and Luigi inhaled by Bowser and forced to work with him from inside his body in order to prevent the mad scientist, Forful, from taking over the Mushroom Kingdom. During one particularly confusing segment of the game, the brothers are tasked with entering Bowser's nasal cavity after he inhales a load of pollen so that he can sneeze hard enough to move a ship out of the way. Players must use a DS stylus to bump Mario and Luigi into the pollen particles so that they hit the membranes inside Bowser's nose, and once that's done, they must bash into the swollen ones in order to trigger a powerful sneeze. The entire sequence is completely bonkers, and actually kinda grosses me out a little bit. And this coming from someone who grew up watching a show where two grown men ran around shouting bogeys in quiet public spaces. Number 2. Mesu King, Yakuza Kiwami. When it comes to the Yakuza games, there are probably enough strange minigames to fill an entire list of their own, and we very nearly went for the catfight arena from Yakuza 0. However, that minigame's strangeness doesn't hold a candle to that of Yakuza Kiwami's Mesu King. In short, Mesu King is basically rock, paper, scissors, but with a whole load of extra, rather weird steps. As with normal rock, paper, scissors, players must choose one of the 3 titular objects with the aim of using it to best their opponent. Rock beats scissors, scissors beats paper, paper beats rock, for some reason. So far, so normal. How Mesu King differs from the traditional game, though, is by using it as a tool to have scantily clad women fight each other. Prior to the round commencing, the player chooses one of each type of card from their collection before engaging in the game of chance with their opponent. If they win, then the card that corresponds to the gesture they chose is played, and their opponent loses health. This continues until one woman is crowned the victor. Oh, and for some reason, both women are dressed as sexy versions, in very heavy quotation marks, of various bugs. Probably should have mentioned that earlier, really. It's hardly a footnote, is it? And number 1, butt battles. Dead or Alive Extreme 2, Dead or Alive Extreme 3, Dead or Alive Extreme Venus Vacation, and Dead or Alive Paradise. Oh boy, is there a lot to unpack here. If you're unfamiliar with the Dead or Alive Extreme titles, they are spin-offs from the main Dead or Alive series that allege themselves to be beach volleyball games. As you can probably tell from the on-screen footage, however, the actual sports time is very much an afterthought, and the real focus of the game is, well, I'll just leave you to judge that for yourselves. Aside from beach volleyball, players can take part in a number of different minigames, which vary in ridiculousness, though the most bonkers by a long shot is Butt Battle. Yes, you heard that right, folks. Butt Battle. In terms of actual gameplay, the aim is for the player to knock their opponent off of a pool float and into the surrounding water using dodges and light and heavy attacks. It's just like Dark Souls. Oh, and yes, the only part of the body that either character is allowed to use is their bottom. As though the whole thing weren't weird and or kind of gross enough, the developers of Dead or Alive Extreme 3 thought it would be a wonderful idea to also include wardrobe malfunctions within the minigame, meaning that when a girl was knocked from the floaty, her bikini would start to fall off. Of course it would. I'm sorry, there's no coming back from that. We're going to end the video here. I'll see you on next week's list, I suppose. Hopefully I won't have to shake my head through half of that one.